The Daily Code Snippet. Revision, WAI ARIA, Accessibility Beyond HTML5, and Language. Before discussing how to make buttons accessible, we need to talk about WAI ARIA. WAI ARIA stands for Web Accessibility Initiative Accessible Rich Internet Application Suite. WAI ARIA helps dynamic content and user interface controls that are created with HTML, JavaScript, and other technologies become more accessible to people with disabilities. Without WAI ARIA, some website functionality will not be available to some users with disabilities, especially those who rely on screen readers and those unable to use a mouse. When possible, we still want to use accessibility features built into HTML5. There is a website that tracks how well browsers are implementing the latest accessibility features of HTML5 here. http://www.html5accessibility.com. When HTML5 doesn't fully address accessibility, we need to use the framework provided by WAI ARIA. WAI ARIA is used to describe navigation and identify structures such as menus, primary versus secondary content, and banner information. This helps users identify and move region by region on a web page rather than having to press Tab multiple times to get where they want to go on a page. WAI ARIA is also used to map controls, live regions, and events to APIs, application programming interfaces. So it applies to buttons, drop-down lists, calendar functions, expandable menus, and more. Roles are used to identify the type of widget presented, such as a slider, menu, or progress bar. They can also be used to describe a structure, such as a heading, region, or table. The state of a widget can also be described, such as whether a checkbox is checked or not. We will go over some of the basics associated with WAI ARIA, but to fully understand its features, please review the standards set out by the W3C at https://www.w3.org/WAI/standards-guidelines. And WAI ARIA 1.1 are the current set of guidelines from 2017 and can be found at https://www.w3.org/TR/WAI-ARIA-1.1. WAI ARIA 1.2 is currently under development. It is important to make your buttons and links accessible. When placing a link that will lead to your user being navigated away from the page, they need to know exactly what activating the link or button will do. So when creating your buttons and links, it is important to name them in a way that tells the user its function. So it is best to avoid labels like "click here," for example. It is also important to differentiate a link from a button. Buttons allow for user-triggered actions that can affect the front end or the back end of a website. Front-end actions affect a user's experience, while back-end actions are server-side functions. So a button action may request data, for example. Typically, we want to standardize the appearance of a button so that we enhance a user's recognition of it as a button. Links generally do not alter the function of a website in any way. While there are several WAI ARIA attributes, several of which follow the syntax ARIA-blank, we will look at ARIA label and ARIA labeled by. The ARIA label attribute provides a label that is recognizable name that describes an object. Here is an example. Button opening tag. ARIA-label equals close in quotation marks. OnClick equals my dialog dot close open parentheses close parentheses in quotation marks X button closing tag. We are using ARIA label in this example because the label text for the button is not visible on screen. In this case, the user only sees the letter X, which is understood to be close by sighted users. but the ARIA label describes the action that will occur and reads out that action to someone using a screen reader. Button, opening tag. ARIA labeled by equals submit in quotation marks. Type equals submit in quotation marks. Form action equals URL in quotation marks. Submit, button, closing tag. In a case where the text is visible, then you would use the attribute ARIA labeled by instead. ARIA landmarks are used to identify major sections and regions of a document, such as letting the user know what is the main content. Screen readers compile these landmarks and allow the user to jump to that region of the web page to help navigation. The ARIA landmark role attribute can be added to perform this function. Here are some commonly used values for the role attribute. Article, to make an individual or separate content within a main section. Banner, to identify a section with branding information, also known as page heading. Complementary, content that is not directly related to the main content, also known as an aside. Footer, a region at the bottom that typically contains copyright, policies, and contact information. Main, denotes the main or primary content. Navigation, regions that include menus or links. Section, groups together related elements, typically one or more headings, and additional related content. When multiple regions of the same type exist, an ARIA label attribute is added to further indicate a title for that region. The use of an ARIA label with a section element defines it as an ARIA landmark. With HTML5, elements were added that also define commonly used regions. The preference is always to use HTML5 first and then use ARIA for additional clarification if necessary. Header. Nav. ID, main menu, ARIA label, main menu. End nav. Main. Section, ID, section 1, ARIA label, first topic. End section. Section, ID, section 2, ARIA label, second topic. End section. Article, ID, article 1, ARIA label, first article, topic. End article. Article, ID, article 2, ARIA label, second article, topic. End article. Aside, ARIA label, key takeaways. End aside. Footer. Nav, ID, footer nav, ARIA label, footer nav. End nav. Prior to HTML5, one would have to do the following. Div, ID equals header, role equals banner, ARIA label equals header. End div. Div, main menu, role navigation, ARIA label main menu, end div. Div, ID main, role main, end div. Div, ID aside, role complementary, ARIA label key takeaways, end div. Div, ID footer, role banner, ARIA label footer, end div. Div, ID footer nav, role navigation, ARIA label footer, end div. If you are viewing an older site that has not been updated to modern standards, you may see legacy code like this. Another important task to making a website accessible is to declare the language of a web page. This is accomplished by declaring the language in the HTML element by using the lang or language attribute. The lang attribute has predefined values, and here are a few examples. DE, German, EN, English, EN-US, American English, EN-GB, British English, ES, Espanol, Spanish, FR, French, HE, Hebrew, HI, Hindi, JA, Japanese, NV, Navajo, RU, Russian, TL, Tagalog, UR, Urdu, ZH, Chinese. This is how the HTML would look. HTML opening tag, lang equals AR, in quotation marks, HTML closing tag. HTML opening tag, lang equals en-us in quotation marks, end HTML tag. Closing HTML tag. HTML opening tag, lang equals en-gb in quotation marks, HTML closing tag. HTML lang equals es in quotation marks, HTML closing tag. HTML lang equals de in quotation marks, HTML closing tag. HTML opening tag, lang equals nv in quotation marks, HTML closing tag. HTML opening tag, lang equals zh in quotation marks, HTML closing tag. So in the first example, we are declaring the language in Arabic, the second in American English, the third in British English, the fourth in Spanish, the fifth in German, the sixth in Navajo, and the last in Chinese. Presented by Designers Learn Code.